Okay, so welcome to the Dragons alumni panel. So we're going to be talking about summer programs and hearing about Emma and Sammy's experiences on summer programs at Dragons. We have a list of questions that we've come up with that that I'll be moderating and going through asking Sammy and Emma, and then we will leave time for you all to ask questions too. So feel free to put those in the chat whenever. You don't need to wait till the end or anything. Go ahead and put them in the chat and I'll weave them into the conversation. So maybe we'll do them kind of in real time. Maybe I'll save some for the end. But know that we'll get to those questions. And then if you all have questions just about Sammy and Emma's experiences, awesome. We definitely welcome and encourage that. And also questions about other programs or specific questions about the enrollment process or Dragons, I'm super happy to help with any of those types of questions too. So pretty much all is welcome during this call. Just to introduce myself, my name is Alex. I worked at Dragons for the last 3 years, but I've been in the student travel world since 2015. And I absolutely love these types of experiences. They've changed my life, and I really enjoy chatting with students and families and helping them choose the right program. That's my role at Dragon. So really chatting with all of you and trying to support however I can to find the best program for you. And now I'm going to have Sammy and Emma introduce themselves. So Emma, do you want to get us started?
Sure. Hi everyone. I'm Emma Bailey. I use she, her pronouns. I went on 2 Dragons programs, so big testament to how much I enjoyed my first program. I went to Peru for 6 weeks, and I went to Indonesia for 6 weeks as well. And a little about where I'm at now. I graduated college last spring from NYU, and now I work in Minneapolis. I do legal and corporate research. And I still feel like even though I'm far from where I was when I did my Dragons programs, I definitely take those lessons with me into everything I do.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Emma. Sammy?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Hi, Lauren. We've talked a lot today. Yeah, my name is Sammy. I also use she, her pronouns. I also did an Indonesia program when I was in high school. This summer going into my senior year, I did 6 weeks there. And it was a totally transformative program. I graduated college 2 years ago. I studied development studies, which is really what my program focused on too. And now I work for Dragons as an outreach coordinator. So I work with Alex, and I help families find programs and get them on trips. And I do a lot of school outreach. I'm based in New York. So I'm the only one, or it's still dark, I think. Yeah, but also a testament of how much I loved my program is now all these years later, have come back to work for them to give students the same experience I had, which is super special.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Sammy. Yeah, and since you brought up location, if everyone wants to share where they're located in the chat, that could be helpful. Bert, I know you said you're in Minneapolis, so that's awesome. I didn't mention earlier, but I live and work out of Tucson, Arizona. I work remotely for Dragons, so it's still very sunny and quite beautiful here. Yeah, if you all wanted to share where you're located in the chat, that could be kind of nice to ground up. So I'll go ahead and meantime to get us started with the first question. So this is for both Emma and Sammy. I'd just love to hear why you chose to go on a Dragons program and what was it that, made you decide to say yes to this type of adventure or experience.
Sammy, do you want to start off?
Sure. Yeah, so I found Dragons pretty serendipitously, online on a Google search, and it had turned out that I had a cousin who had also done the program. So that was really nice. But I think in the beginning, I was just looking for something different. I had done a team tour this summer before, and I've always been a really big traveler, and I was kind of looking for the next step. I've always been the really adventurous one, and I really just wanted something different. And I kind of loved that I had never heard of dragons before, because I felt like there was just more out there. And like once I found dragons, I was like, oh, okay, this is it. Like this is really what I was looking for. This like level of immersion, this like sending students and like guiding students through this kind of travel was really exactly what I was looking for. And I think the cherry on top for me was really my home visit. So I had one of the Dragons staff at the time come visit me and my family and talked us through like all of our questions. And I just like knew that it was the program for me. And I can also talk about how I chose Indonesia, if that's helpful. Okay, but yeah, I was between a few different programs. I wanted to go somewhere, just like kind of far away enough to warrant going for 6 weeks. I felt like if I'm gonna go for so long, it should be somewhere that like it takes a long time to get to. And like when else am I gonna have 6 weeks to travel? Um, I loved the Indonesia program because it felt like it was incorporating so many of the things that I loved about dragons in general. Like it had tons of homestays and rugged travel and like jungle and city and beach. So it didn't really feel like I had to choose. It felt like I got everything in one. I also was and still am really passionate about environmentalism and conservation. And that's a big focus on that program. So that also helped me weed it out. But I just think in general, like the diversity of what you get to experience on the Indonesia program and every program, but to me at that point, is really what drew me there.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Thanks, Sam.
Similarly to Sammy, I found dragons online, but I had never ever heard of it. I was like, what is this? Is this real? Um, but I chose to go on a trip because I'm from kind of a small town in Minneapolis, and not many people leave, and there just isn't a lot of diversity of thought, of location, of action, and I just grew really sick of that. And the more that I looked into Dragon's programs, I just became entranced by this idea that I didn't have to subscribe to what those around me were doing. So I chose Peru because I really wanted to experience the outdoors in a way that I hadn't before. Obviously, there are no mountains where I'm from, so that was a huge call for me. And yeah, honestly, it felt so fated to me how everything happened. It just fell into place so well. That's not to say that I wasn't nervous or maybe had a bit of apprehension, but I think once I discovered dragons, felt like I just knew it was something that I had to do. And I went back because, well, I had seen kind of what it's like to be in a climate like Peru, where maybe the people are super kind and loving, but a bit more reserved. I wanted something that was different from that because while I went to Peru for the nature initially, I just fell in love with the connections that I was able to make with the people that I met, the Peruvians that I met specifically. And so I really wanted to see, what is this like in an environment that's very different from Latin America? And that really drew me to Indonesia. And of course, I wasn't disappointed. I found um, so much energy and light in a lot of the Indonesian people that I met, and overall was just super floored by both of my experiences.
So wonderful to hear. Thanks both of you for sharing. Yeah, I would say one of the common threads with dragons is that like students want to do something that's different and have an experience that really stands out in a unique way for them. That is totally one of a kind. So that makes a lot of sense to me. The next question is, what is something that really surprised you about your program? Emma, you can speak to each one or just one if you want to you.
Mm, I feel like I was really surprised by the amount of education and learning that I encountered in my program. And I feel like a lot of people shy away from those words, especially when you're on summer vacation, because that's not what most people want to do. They don't really want an extension of school, but learning on a dragons program really isn't like that. It's so organic and it's so like as you go, and what you're learning, sure, it could be in a textbook, but it really just doesn't feel like that. It's right in front of you, and I still feel like I could stand in front of a classroom and give a lecture on the things that I learned in Indonesia and in Peru, but it comes so naturally and organically, and I just remember coming home and being like, oh my gosh, I feel like my brain has expanded 10 times, but it's like beautiful and full and plump, and not this thing that I'm, just absorbing off of a screen or from a textbook. It was really just this like this learning filled with passion.
Awesome. Sammy, how about for you? Oh, Sammy, you're on mute.
That was so beautifully said. And I was going to say the same thing, just with how much I learned, but I'll give a different answer. I think I was surprised at how quickly I felt at home. I think in the beginning, it felt like a big leap for me. Like getting on the plane, I was really nervous and I had spent time away before. And I think it's really common, even just like talking to students and hearing how nervous they are. Um, and within the first few days, like less, I like have a journal entry from sitting on the floor of the airport in LA. And it's like, you don't know the people sitting in front of you now, but at the end of 6 weeks, like these are going to be some of your best friends. And it did not even take until we landed and I still talk to them today. And I think I was just looking back through my photos right before this, and I just remember how quickly I felt like, wow, I really understand these people. They really understand me, and not just my dragons group, right? Like the whole dragons community, the instructors, and every single person that we worked with or lived with, like my homestay family that I still keep in touch with. There was this like really beautiful common thread that united us all. And I think it was the first time in my life I'd experienced it to that degree across such difference. Similar to Emma, I grew up on Long Island. It's like pretty monotonous. It's very much lacks, there's definitely no mountains. So it was a really awesome way to experience what it's like to live in a different place, and like learning how to feel at home in that was really surprising to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great. Thanks so much. So out of your dragons experiences, what are like a couple of the experiences that like really stand out to you the most?
I can start.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the first is during our orientation, we stayed in Sumatra, which is probably where a lot of your coffee is from. And the whole orientation was amazing, but we went on this one incredible trek and we got to see orangutans, and we slept over in a tent, and it was raining, and it was just like the funniest night. Um, Another is during our expedition phase, we took a small fishing boat around the Komodo Islands, off the coast of the island of Flores, which was just so beautiful. And the best moment was on our second morning. We all slept on the top floor deck, really more of this boat, like sardines, like we all were like in our sleeping packs. And we woke up to the most amazing sunrise. Like the sky was pink, the water was pink. It was so magical. And X phase is the part of our program that's towards the end. So it was like such a special way to just spend the last few days with our group. And then I'm sure Emma feels similarly, but the homestay that we did in Sampella was like the most transformative part of my experience. This is a nomadic fishing community. They were forced to settle by the Indonesian government in the 50s. Look how much you learn on a dragons program. Yeah, they essentially like build houses in the middle of the ocean on coral and bamboo. So we spent a week living there. And I went octopus fishing with my homestay father every single morning. And yeah, like just the way that that family took me in is something I think about all the time.
Mm, that's beautiful. Sammy, can you explain what X phase is to folks that
Yeah.
maybe don't know?
Yeah, so X phase is expedition phase. So it's a part of our program component, well, not components, our program structure. It normally falls between the second and the third homestay or after the second homestay, right before transference, which is basically the opposite of orientation. It's a few days on a summer program or about a week on a semester program where the students get to design the itinerary. So with the help of the instructors, tools more so than actual guidance, the students get to put together an itinerary for those days or week. And they really design everything, and the instructors give them full agency and full lead. So, if they make a mistake, then they figure it out. It's like super experimental. And it's really, really fun. It's a great test of leadership and working together as a group. And it's also just nice because in general, the program is structured to give students more independence towards the end. So X phase is a nice way of kind of putting everything that you've learned into practice.
Perfect. Thanks. All right, Emma, we'll turn it over to you.
Yes, I have to echo Sammy's sentiment about Sampella, just being one of the most beautiful and miraculous things I've ever seen. My homestay father was also an octopus fisherman, so I think maybe we should touch base on that. But yeah, it's the people who live in Sampella have like enlarged spleens so they can hold their breath underwater for like 17 minutes or something. Honestly, if you Google it, it'll come up right away. It's that in itself is just miraculous. And when I was in Peru, I had a trek. We were heading to Machu Picchu, but in my opinion, the trek was much more beautiful than Machu Picchu, which has been commodified quite a bit. But I saw an avalanche, like
Wow.
just right by my face. I mean, I wasn't close enough to be in danger, but it was just like I'm at a loss for words, but it was just absolutely wonderful. And on that hike, I remember passing through so many ecosystems that I was just shocked that yesterday I'd seen snow and today it's like I'm in the rainforest. And in college I studied poetry, and I feel like about half my poems probably come from my experiences, like just exploring the world with dragons. And that trek in particular, honestly, it just will live in my mind forever.
That's so beautiful. Wow.
That in itself was a
Love
problem.
to hear. Yeah, I'd love to see some of those
Yeah.
poems at some point. Um, that's awesome. So now I'd like to ask you both. I mean, you both alluded to your homestays, but I'd love to just hear a little bit more about your homestay experience. This is a question that we get on the outreach team constantly of like, what are the homestays like? How do you communicate? Are they individual? Are you staying with other students? So I would just love for you to share a little bit more of that. Like, were you scared? Like, did it, what, how was that for you? So whatever you'd like to share about your homestay and language learning.
I can go. So my first ever homestay was in Peru, and I didn't speak any Spanish. So of course I was incredibly nervous because a lot of the kids on my program did speak Spanish, not all, but a lot. And I ended up doing a homestay at a kindergarten. So every morning I would wake up to children all around. And it was absolutely beautiful. I ended up just feeling so inspired by the need to connect with my homestay family that I'm now, I would say, almost fluent in Spanish, just because that was the experience that really made me like jump out of my comfort zone. And actually, about a year ago today, I went back to Peru with a girl from my program, and we stayed with that homestay family. Um, and we keep in touch, via Facebook and whatnot. But honestly, I feel like so incredibly connected to them, and I've done other homestays. I feel like most programs have 1 to 3, and all of them were just absolutely phenomenal. But I feel like from what I hear from Dragons alumni, there's usually like such a connective experience in the homestay that I feel like, well, it's one of the things that students are often most nervous about. I feel like that's where the biggest jump in progress is, because it ends up really being one of the most impactful parts.
Wow, that's awesome. I love that you went to visit. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
How special. Wow, that's awesome. Sammy, how about for you?
Yeah, I was really scared of going into homestays. I wasn't scared about like, I don't know, like I guess scared isn't the right word, but I think I was really nervous. I'd never done anything similar to that level of immersion, and I did not speak any Indonesian. So I was kind of just like confused, like how am I gonna bond with them? What am I gonna do with them all day? Um, and I yeah, I mean, similar to Emma, I just like fell so in love with all of the families that I stayed with. Still in touch with my homestay mom from San Paulo, which is really nice. Um, and yeah, I just felt so taken in on my first homestay. Actually, I just twisted my ankle on a trek the day before, and so they wound up moving me. But what was crazy is that I moved into a house with 3 daughters who were like, and I'm one of 3 girls, and they were all evenly spaced, just like my family. And the oldest, like, they was so symmetrical. Like, one of them was a doctor, just like my sister. And it was so crazy because that was the first homestay that I've ever done in my life. And so it was like I went from my family to this family. And I was just thinking, like, oh, this could have been me. Like on my first night, my homestay sister asked me to watch La La Land with her. And I was like, hold on a second. Like, just the similarities were so crazy. And it was so, I thought that was almost so like written in the stars for me to have entered into that homestay because it really did feel like this could be my family if we lived in Indonesia. And I think progressively it got, more unfamiliar, but I just found in every family that I went with so much love and compassion and like the capacity to take in students really as their own, like so wholeheartedly just to love and bond with someone else and like for no other motive, which was like so striking, I think, to me, and something I just really began to appreciate. Yeah, I mean, like I got sick when I was in San Paulo. My mom would like sing to me and put washcloths on my head. Like she was just the most incredible. I wonder if we had the same family, most incredible woman in the world. Um, and I think the language was great. Sorry, speaking a bit, but just to touch on that. So the way that Dragons does language is they'll like divide students into small groups based on level, and then you're paired with a local instructor. And so you'll do lessons that way on a non-language immersion program like Indonesia and Peru both were. The point isn't to like become fluent in Spanish or Indonesian. It's more to like be able to communicate effectively with your homestay and your needs. And so all of our homestay or all of our language learning was really geared towards like, okay, what do I need to get by? And Indonesian was so easy to learn because there's no conjugation. So that was a huge plus. But by my second homestay, I could like really communicate with my family. And by my third in San Pela, I have these memories of sitting and hearing the story of how my homestay mom fell in love with said octopus hunter. And in my head, I swear she was speaking in English because I remember the whole story, but she obviously wasn't. So by the end, I like could really understand it, which was really awesome. And I think a lot of people in my group felt similarly, like you could get by or like know enough to understand what was going on, which was great.
Yeah, amazing. It would be very serendipitous if you had the same family. That would be
For their
wild.
2 sons.
Yes. Yes.
It was the house right next to the Dragons program house.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
so
it
funny.
was like an elevated sleeping area.
Yes, and the
There were,
shower was outside to the right
yes.
of the
Oh,
house.
yes. Always
Yeah.
cats. Cats
Yes,
everywhere. The
they
funny
put me
thing,
in that house on
actually, in
purpose.
Stampella, the cats can swim.
Yeah.
And so their tails are like this. They're like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy.
That's
That's
so funny.
amazing.
That
Wow.
Well, this
shower
was meant to be.
That's
is what I wrote my college essay on because
really
my I'm very tall. You can't tell, but I'm very tall, and that shower, as Emma knows, is very short. And I didn't understand that you were supposed to sit down in the shower and not stand up. And so my dragons instructors put me there on purpose because one of my goals was to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And so
Mhm.
like 6 days in, I went to my instructors and I was like, I don't fit in the shower. And they were like, haha, like we knew it. That's why we put you in there. Like it was this real moment of like being 16. I was like so scared to ask for help. And yeah, it was a real moment of growth. Very silly, but
Well, that's so beautiful. I'm glad that that happened. It sounds like you both had amazing homestay experiences. And like that's also a pretty common thread that a lot of students are nervous beforehand and understandably so, and then have such incredible experiences because these families, like we are showing here, will stay with dragons for years and host students for years and are, incredibly welcoming and they're really pros at what they're doing. So when you travel with dragons and go on a homestay program, you're in very good hands. Or when you go on a homestay during a program.
Mhm.
um, well, that's awesome. So I know you both kind of alluded to like staying a little bit in touch with your homestays. I'd love to hear like, do you keep in touch with anyone else from your programs?
Um, I can go. Uh, yes, I definitely keep in touch. Like I mentioned, I went back to Peru with a girl from my trip who I see periodically. I think we've done two reunion trips, the girls from my Peru program. And on my Indonesia program, I actually met my like best friend in the entire world. It's always funny because she grew up in Colorado and I grew up in Minnesota, so people will sometimes put two and two together and be like, "How'd you meet?" We're like, "Oh, Indonesia." So that's kind of goofy, but yeah, I love her to death, and the fact that we share this like life-changing experience has really just like blossomed our relationship quite a bit. And we both obviously share that value of travel. So we went to Europe together about a year after my program ended. And so it really just it's such a great friendship when you can meet someone based off of shared values and not necessarily off of convenience like typical American structures will put you in. You're in high school with this person and you both play soccer, or you both just end up being on the same dorm floor, so you're friends. These friendships are a lot different because they're like cross country in a way, that they bring together people with similar desires, and I think that just can't be beat in a lot of ways in life.
Mhm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks,
yeah.
Emma. Sammy, who do you keep in touch with?
I keep in touch with two of my best friends who I met on the program. One lives in Montana, the other is in Texas, so also pretty far away. Um, yeah, they were like by people, and it was so awesome because same as what Emma said, like we surface level had I don't think we would have ever met otherwise if not for dragons. But we came together like so strongly and we're there for each other just like throughout the whole program, which was so special and nice. And like as a group, like those two friends and like three of the other guys from the program, we all still keep in touch because we're all based like in the US and we'll like see each other when we can. And yeah, it's just amazing. They're like, we're always texting or FaceTiming. And it was like 9 years ago. So, well, no, not nine, 8. So it's like really nice that it's stood the test of time too, because those are like through high school, through college, through post college is like you've really changed a lot as a person. But I think because those characteristics of what makes a dragon student are kind of with you for life, like these friendships, I think are going to really last forever.
Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. I love to hear that. Yeah. So you all could be, your best friends are out there waiting to be met.
We could be on this
That's,
call right now.
yeah, they could. I love that. Okay, so now I'd love to hear like who was one person that you really learned the most from on your program?
God, that's such a hard question.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
okay, I'm gonna cheat and do two. But I think one
sure.
was my instructor. Um, really all of them, but I had this one instructor, her name was Sarah, and she was like a wanderer. She had like traveled for so long. And I think I really connected with her because she hadn't been to Indonesia before. So she was like a professional traveler and like really up with Dragon's framework, but she hadn't been there. So it was so nice to connect with someone who this was also new for them, but they were handling it with like such grace. And she was just such a light and like creative energy that I'd never experienced. And yeah, she just taught me like so many ways of viewing the world that I still think about all the time. And I still keep in touch with her. And then the other one is my homestay mom in my first homestay in Jakarta. At first, I really struggled in that homestay. I just like couldn't find my bearing, and I was like new to homestays and I didn't really understand what to do with myself. And by the end, like she was just like this powerhouse of a woman, and she really, really took me in. And I just learned so much from her about like being a good person. Like she was such a giver, and like she brought me to all of these community events that she was involved in, and I met her mom and her like grandchildren, and just seeing her in all of these different roles of like being an empowered woman, I think was really, really awesome for me to see. So yeah, those are my two.
I have to give go a different route than Sammy, I would say. I feel like I I mean, definitely met so many like instructors and homestay members that were super influential for me, but I felt like walking away, I really remember having this like strong pull to the people that I met in passing. So I actually wrote my college essay on a vendor at a fish market in Peru. And we had never exchanged names or anything like that, you know, and there was quite a language barrier, so the connection was broken. But I felt like that language barrier was actually what made things so strong in a way, because when you can't use your words, you have to use like your energy and everything else. So I felt like a lot of those people that I met where I could tell when I first met them that they maybe thought I was just coming to their country to take pictures for Instagram and then leave, like so many people unfortunately do. And then, you know, I was able to kind of establish somewhat of a connection with this other human being and you know express my interest in their life and exchange some sort of compassion for one another. I felt like those interactions really left me feeling just super filled up and gratified, and ultimately it really ended up teaching me that across the world, I feel like we are just so much more alike than we are different. And we're so focused on all these big, like, I don't know, big divides, and there's there's such an emphasis on power in the world, especially in politics and business, and when you get down to this just like human to human level, it becomes so much easier to break those things down in your mind and come up with your own interpretation of what it means to be someone who tries to live globally.
It's beautiful. I think that I come back to that so many times in my travels. The more I travel, the more I realize how we are so much more alike than we are different, as humans across just trying to do our best and connect and yeah, be healthy and make life beautiful. So absolutely agree with that. That's awesome. Um, so now I would love to, I mean, Emma, you kind of touched on this. I'll be curious here if you have more to add. But would also love to hear from Sammy too. Like, what new understanding of the world might you have after doing your Dragons programs or program?
Yeah. Um, I think the biggest takeaway is very similar to what Emma said. Um, but I think it's really just like we're all just humans living on the planet. And that sounds so silly at surface value, but I think when you dive deeper, like we're all just like doing our best. There's a million ways to live and make a living and have a family and be a person and a family member. And there's just like hundreds of thousands of versions of that, but they're all so similar because we're all at the end of the day, like trying to do the same thing, right? Like we're all just trying to be human. And I think like the similarities of the human experience are so expansive, and to like really step into that and understand what that feels like okay, my shower might be a bucket shower, but I'm still taking a shower at the end of the day and then tucking myself into bed, right? It's like those tiny little details that make us human. I think the second one is that also kind of similar to what Emma said, but the world is a lot smaller than it seems. Everyone is so interconnected, and even if I felt, before I had gone to Sumatra, like so disconnected from that place, like, little did I know that this like one jungle provides the palm oil that's in everything that I eat all the time. And right, like there's all of this like microcosm of networks all over the world that affect everything. And I think um there's this concept that I didn't learn it on my dragons program, but I think it encompasses dragons really well. Um I traveled for 2 years after college by myself, which I 100% would have never done if I had not gone on dragons. I was like, okay, if I could go to Indonesia when I was 16 and I didn't have a phone, like now I'm 22, I can have an Airbnb whenever if I'm ever in a pickle. Um, and one of the things I learned was I was doing some work with Aboriginal folk in Australia, and there's this word called Yunthella, and it translates to be at one with one place. And if you like dig a little deeper, it means that for every little thing to work, every little thing must work. And I think that's like such a beautiful way of looking at the world. And so what Dragons teaches you, like everything is always working together, and being at one with like the people you're around and the place that you're in is like, I think just the most nourishing way to live. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. Like, you're like, if I can go to Indonesia without my phone for 6 weeks, I can do this. I can figure it out. And
I was like, I can run a marathon. What can I do?
yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's so true. Something that I observe like from my own travels and from students that do dragons programs is that they're really leaving programs with the skills to figure things out, to understand everything is figure outable and just like to have that confidence that like, hey, I don't have all the answers, but I know that I can ask the right questions and like get the right resources and get to where I need to go. In all things and like figuring out what we want to our next career move to be and figuring out like what we're looking for in a partner or there's just so many big things that I think that like this grit and resilience that we grow during these types of experiences like really do stick with us.
Yeah.
um
A big part is learning how to trust yourself
hmm.
throughout the whole program. Like you really do feel empowered, like, okay, you can do this. And that sticks with you forever, really, after.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the questions that I had written down here is like, what are some of the skills that you learned during your program that impacted your life in the biggest way? And maybe you're touching on them, but I'm curious if there's any others that are standing out to both of you that are like, that is a nugget I really took with me and still use.
kind of to build off of what Sammy said, I feel like during my Dragons programs, I felt the most in touch with myself and my own capacity to grow more so than ever. I mean, my first Dragons program was 7 years ago. And, now I've graduated college, I've lived on my own, blah, blah, blah. I still feel like I experienced the most growth when I was 16. And part of that is because, you're journaling every day. Well, you don't have to, but I got really into it. And you're just surrounded by people who are like so hungry to reflect on their experience and speak about it, which is something that I just feel like is kind of lost on society today. We often like retreat into our own little bubbles and log on online and do our own thing, but on a Dragons program, that isn't really the case. You can definitely take alone time, but you're like forced to be with your thoughts in a way where you just experience such rapid growth that it is really fortifying, and it does make you feel like, okay, well, if I can do that, then I can do this. And similarly to Sammy, I've done solo travel too, and I I never really feel shaken up because I'm like, well, if I can be, piranha fishing in the Amazon, on the this boat that just doesn't look like it's gonna hold, then I can do this. So yeah, I would say Dragons programs just have a really, really seamless way of getting you in touch with yourself and with your true authentic self, unburdened by judgments of others or what people around you are doing or different trends or social norms in a way.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks so much, Emma. Sammy, did you have anything else to add, or you feel good about what you'd said before? Oh, you're muted. You're still
I
muted.
had a little, I'll go quick, but yeah, I think like questioning is a big skill I learned, like asking myself important questions, asking like, how do I want to walk through the world? Like, what kind of person do I want to be? And like, kind of understanding that my experience was like really entirely up to me and my mindset and like understanding. And I think that's true for, well, I can't really say that for a lot of life, but I mean, obviously things happen. Um, but yeah, just like really having a really strong sense of self was super important, especially at that age, because I think it's really easy to be distracted. And I know that that was so influential to like where I went to college, what I studied, which isn't everything, but at that point, I mean, it like really does determine a big chunk of the next 4 years of your life. And like who I am today, like the traveling that I've done, I think like I really do owe so much of who I am to Dragons, which seems crazy because it's like 6 weeks of your life, but it's all there. And then I think the other thing, just skill wise, is like I like really considered myself a traveler after that. I think a lot of Dragons students do. Like anything that happens, I'm like, okay, I got this, flight delayed, whatever. Like really just going with the flow, I think was super important, and being flexible. And communicating. I think like communicating your needs and your feelings is such a big part of Dragons, and always being like someone who can talk about how they're doing or feeling or like what they need was really big when I was younger.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Love how like capable you all feel from the programs. Amazing.
Oh, thanks.
Amazing. Okay, so I'm gonna ask the last question that like I have for you all because I want to leave some time for the folks here to ask questions to you. So this one is, what advice do you have maybe to like your past self before you did a program, but also like in the mindset of what advice would you be giving like a student considering a Dragons program or a student about to leave on a Dragons program?
I would say one of my favorite pieces of advice that I've ever been given is just to like let go. And I feel like before my Dragons program, I had to let go a little bit. I had to like let go of my fears, let go of my need to kind of like have a grasp and a control and knowing what's next. I I feel like on Dragons programs you're really supported, and it's like Sammy talked about X phase, you know, you start with a lot, and gradually you won't notice it, but it kind of decreases, and you learn this skill of independence. And so I think this is such a situation um where you have to really learn to trust yourself and let go in a sense, and just flow with kind of your intuition instead of these outside forces. And Dragons, you know, does a great job at putting structure in place for you in a way that also gives you the ability to take initiative, and that's something that I feel like is kind of unique, because I think as high schoolers and college students, you're faced with a lot of structure that you don't have a lot of say in, and Dragons has a really great way of doing it for you without doing it all for you. Um,
Hmm, sure. I'm a, something that I'll chime in here too, but some advice that I like to give when students are looking for a program and they're kind of just trying to decide between a couple. I typically encourage them to choose the one that like maybe scares them a little bit more or feels like a little bit more of a stretch or a little more out of their comfort zone, because we have these support systems in place and we have the instructors there that are experts to like really help guide and facilitate this experience so that it's like go to that place that feels like maybe just a little bit past the comfort zone, because it's like the time to do it. We've got the folks to teach you and like support you along the way. So that kind of like I felt like related a little bit. Sammy, how about for you?
Yeah, so I just found my journal. It says "Be the Change," thanks to my mom in
Oh,
2015. And I think that's perfect advice because the first words in my journal are thoughts on departure. Not going to lie, I cried 10 times on the plane. I don't know why. I was so sad. And then the next thing, this place is amazing. Underline, exclamation, exclamation. Words cannot describe what it feels like to be here. I feel so alive and at home. Literally, like the next day on orientation, which was like we were barely there. This was actually on a day where we drove up to Sumatra. So it's just funny that I was like, I'm so at home because we hadn't even, I don't think, slept yet. Um, yeah, I would just say like which is just so this is so funny to look through, but yeah, like know that whatever like feels scary before a program is going to feel so like not even unnerving after, and not even after 6 weeks, like evident by that, like after 24 hours. I think sometimes it's like feels like this really big jump, and I feel like I hear that a lot from students I work with too. But like Dragon students are always like kind of excited about that. Like it's exciting to be pushed and to grow, and I think that was like a big goal of mine too. um so I think, yeah, approaching things with an open mind is really, really important. Like going in with no expectations of yourself, of what a place is going to be like, of what the people in that community should be like, um, or of just like how people should live, like really leaving all judgments and worldviews like in the back seat and just kind of exploring everything. I'm like, don't hate me if I say with a childlike sense of wonder, but like with like playful curiosity. Um, I found that to be really important. And I think I still bring that into a lot of the travel and work that I do now. Um, yeah. And I would also just advise students to like go for it. Like not only on this program, but or like not only on deciding on the program, but like throughout the program, like talk to all the people. I think it's still something I implement in my life today. Like I never go on my phone when I'm in the elevator. Like those tiny, tiny moments, like Emma talked about it, are always the most special. And just like being so present throughout a program is also amazing. So if any, like a little part of any of this Zoom like tickles your interest, it probably means that you would adore a program. Like not all of it has to speak to you. I think it could probably also feel overwhelming. But I think just like if there's a tiny little gut instinct telling you to do it, like that is your sign that it's for you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Mic drop. Awesome. Um, awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sammy and Emma, for answering all of my questions. So now I'm gonna turn it over to all of you, folks that are joining us today, listening in. Feel free to write questions in the chat. I see one already, so I'm gonna start with that one, but you're also welcome to unmute yourself and ask directly if that feels better to you. But just wanted to open up the next 7 minutes for your questions. Um, yeah. So Christine said she's listening on behalf of her daughter today, who's a junior in college, and she's interested in the Nepal summer program. Yeah, which she can absolutely still join. That's like more of our our like older student program. We'll do an older cohort and a younger cohort, Christine. Um, but the question is for you all in retrospect, now that you've been through college, do you think it would matter a lot if she were older than most of the other students on the trip? So she would be 21, and I think there's a 20-year-old enrolled on that program right now, and a lot of like 19-year-olds. What do you all think about that?
Well, I can speak to that. I on my Indonesia trip had our friend Sean. I think he was a junior in college. And I think the youngest person was 15. So large range, which it sounds like isn't the case for the Nepal trip. But
Yeah.
honestly, I feel like those two actually ended up being really good friends, which was funny because there was a huge age gap, but I feel like it doesn't necessarily show as much as it would maybe in an American setting, because I think a lot of American conversation revolves around school and extracurriculars and sports and work, and the conversation on dragons programs isn't really like that. In fact, I remember when we first got there, one of my instructors kind of gave us a little nudge to stop talking about the AP classes and start talking about what we were having for dinner or something else. And I think that for that reason, the age gap honestly can be more educational and informative and really help you broaden your horizons. And it doesn't tend to be super isolating. That being said, I don't necessarily know what his thoughts were about that, but it seemed to me like he really enjoyed himself and was able to learn a lot from the trip.
That's super helpful. Thanks, Emma. Really, really helpful. Um, Great. And then there was a question, how many people are in a given homestay? Sammy, do you want to take that one?
Yeah. So every student gets a homestay family. So every program is 12 students. So that means we have 12 families that will take in a student. Um, each student gets their own homestay family. We do this because, like, if we were in a homestay together, like me, Alex, and Emma, we'd probably speak in English and we'd hang out by ourselves, or maybe we'd like go walk around on the weekend. And it kind of provides a buffer between us and our homestay family. And then when you're there as an individual, you really have to push past that first level of awkwardness. And then you get to experience like really what it's like to be their kid for the week or 3 weeks. Yeah, so all 12 students are given a homestay family.
Yeah. And that's almost always the case across all of our programs. There might maybe at like one point there will be like a really special homestay, maybe in the Amazon or something, and like we'll have to share, or we're just in like such a small. I remember visiting one of our programs in Thailand, and the students were in such a small community that there just weren't enough homestay families. So some of the students were like sharing families, but almost always they're individual. So that's something to expect, Griffin. Great question.
To bridge off that a bit, because I know that that can be scary a little bit. You often have neighbors that are on your program. So like someone on your program could be 2 houses down. They could be 3 blocks away, but they could also be quite literally next door. So you can kind of figure out who's nearby you, and you're never too far away from someone that you know. And I think that that's a thing that Dragons kind of ensures. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
Quite intentional. Yeah. So you're like never, you're usually like a stone's throw away from the next person is like what we like to say. And a lot of the homestay families are also friends. So there will be like lots of time hanging out all together, or like multiple families and then students, and there's just lots of time. You don't feel, I don't think it's a very isolating feeling. I think sometimes students can think that, but you're actually surrounded by people and you are seeing like the other students in your group almost every day, with the exception of weekends. So yeah, but that's a great question, Griffin, and it's one we get quite a bit. So I love that you asked that. Okay, we have 1 minute left. I'd love to hear if there's any other questions. Anyone have any other questions for Sammi, Emma, or myself?
Or if there's anything anyone's like nervous or hesitating about that we can address.
Yeah. Not seeing anything just yet, but just so everyone knows, we did record this meeting, or this webinar. So we are gonna send this out to everyone who registered. So you all will get a copy of this if you want to listen again, or share with a parent or a student, depending on your role. Yeah, and then you'll have our email, so you can always reach out to us, and we would be super happy to connect on a more individual level and help with any questions that come up. So that brings us to the top of the hour. I'll stick around if there's any questions that folks want to ask on a smaller basis, but I really just wanted to give a huge thank you to Emma and Sammi. I'm so appreciative for the stories that you shared and the wisdom you shared with everyone tonight. It's been super fun.
Thanks so much, Alex. And
Thanks,
Sammi.
Alex. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye, guys.
Bye. And again, I'll stick around if there's any other questions that folks need to ask. But if not, thanks so much for your time and for hanging out tonight.